Well, now, yesterday I spoke to Bella Dabrera, the director of the Foundation of Western Civilization program at the Institute of Public Affairs. You may recall we talked about the latest version of the national curriculum in education, which was released on Monday. There is no evidence, I repeat, no evidence, that this will in any way improve the educational outcomes of our children. It perpetuates what I've called for years now indoctrination, parading as education. It seems that government and sadly parents haven't woken up to the enormity of the education crisis facing us, with our young people being sent out into the real world, arguably infinitely worse prepared than children in comparable countries. Yet it's axiomatic, the nation's future is tied to the education of our young. Forget politics. The Labor Party announced on Monday a $140 million scheme which would lure high-achieving students into the teaching profession by offering up to $12,000 a year to study for an education degree and then work in regional parts of Australia. It's a good policy. Now, I don't know about regional Australia. Teachers with higher levels of personal scholarship are desperately needed everywhere. Counting university education, which is where teachers are trained, and including primary and secondary, get your head around this. The total government expenditure, your money on education in 2019-20 was $114,000 million. Is this wasted? The number of students with an ATAR over 80 going into education degrees has collapsed to 3.3%. It was 30% in the early 1990s. And there are forecast teacher shortages of over 4,000 positions by 2025. Now, the Labor Party said they'll pay $10,000 a year to 5,000 students with an ATAR over 80 to study an education degree, and if they commit to teaching in a regional area, they'll get $12,000. Now, previous high scholastic achievement by the teacher doesn't necessarily give them the talent to impart knowledge and install a passion for learning in their students, but it's certainly a hell of a start. We learned at the end of last year that up to 38% of secondary maths classes are taught by teachers who aren't trained in the subject. These teachers, if they're lucky, are a chapter ahead of the kids. That's what's called out-of-field teaching. That is, teachers who've not studied maths at the tertiary level. An analysis by the Australian Mathematical Sciences Institute found last year more than 75% of students will be taught maths by an out-of-field teacher at least once between years 7 and 10. And as I said, up to 38% of secondary maths classes are taught by teachers who aren't trained in the subject. Also, at the end of last year, we had the test results of the National Assessment Program Literacy and Numeracy, known as NAPLAN. The results showed that 1 in 10 girls and 1 in 5 boys had failed to reach the minimum standard for writing after 9 years of education. 21.3% of boys and 10.7% of girls fell below the national standard, which means they couldn't punctuate sentences, spell simple words, or write a story in paragraphs. 1 in 5 teenage boys in high school is semi-literate. Glenn Fay from the Centre for Independent Studies made the staggering comment, and I quote, "Once you're in high school, there's very little direct instruction in literacy."